about what's going on in society and the etiology, what are the factors that cause oral cancer and the pathology. So how the normal tissue becomes malignancy and how these patients who are with malignant lesion or a lesion that can transfer into malignancy present to us. That is also very important for a primary care physician to know, to identify and repair and if necessary. And the history, we need to know history of the patient because we need to we need some background details when we are managing a patient. And when we are examining the patient, we need to examine him as a whole. With the history examination, with the collected information from those, we need to reach a tentative diagnosis. Tentative diagnosis is the most likely diagnosis, or a differential diagnosis. If we can't come to a closer diagnosis, we go for a differential diagnosis. And with that, we need to go for special investigations. We all know that we have to perform a biopsy to prove whether that lesion is cancer, malignancy or not. And after special investigations, we are going for a definitive diagnosis. So, in each and every cancer patient, we need to go for a multidisciplinary team management because we are not going to handle a cancer patient alone. It is not a suitable thing to go alone and handle a cancer patient because various people should come into the team of treatment. And in the MDM, after discussing with the people who are in MDM, that is a multidisciplinary team, and with the patient also, we have respect the patient's opinions also. We need to devise a treatment plan. That is, a treatment plan should be tailor-made for the patient, that particular patient. With a treatment plan that is devised, we are going for the treatment. The treatment would be either single treatment or surgery, radiotherapy or chemotherapy alone, or it could be multimodality, combination of those three treatment modalities. And the treatment can be given with a curative inpatient or a palliative inpatient. Curative means if we diagnose and treat a cancer patient and give him 5-year life expectancy, then we consider that as we have cured the patient. That is 5 years. So some people may not live that long, so we treat them in a palliative inpatient. And after treating, we need to rehabilitate the patient. Rehabilitation means to get the form and function, the previous form and function before the disease. We may not be able to reach it 100%, but we need to try hard to achieve our maximum. And after treating and rehabilitating, we can't let the patient go to the society. We have follow-up. It may be done in either clinic setup, or we need to go for a palliative or terminal care. And as community, we have as doctors, we are bound to the society. We have an obligation towards our society. So we need to give our knowledge and skill to the society to prevent these malignancies occurring. So we need to try to prevent those diseases to our taste. So when it comes to epidemiology, this is considered the 6th most common cancer in the world. And every year globally we get about 275,000 patients, and 2/3 of them are from developing countries, that is from our part of the world. In our country as well as India and Pakistan, this is the most common cancer in the males. The male-female ratio is 2:1, and the 5-year survival rate, that is 50%. That means if we diagnose and treat these patients, half of them are going to die within 50 years time. These are international figures, but in Sri Lanka, the patients who are presenting to us are in late stages. For the late stages late stage patients, that is stage 3 and 4 cancer, the 5-year survival rate is somewhere close to 20%. That means 80% of the people are going to die within 5 years' time. In Sri Lanka, we are getting about 2,500 new cases annually. These are the etiological factors that can cause oral squamous cell carcinoma. It's considered as a multifactorial disease. Though we have identified some causative agents, we know that even if we take tobacco smoking, all the people who are smoking tobacco are not getting malignancies. So that is why it is considered as a multifactorial disease, because if it is tobacco itself can cause cancer, all the people who should be smoking will get cancer, but it is not so. So it is multifactorial. These are some of the etiological agents. In case of radiation we don't see radiation-induced cancers in Sri Lanka, but in countries like Australia, people who are exposed to sunlight get lip cancers mostly. Tertiary syphilis. Tertiary syphilis is not that much of a significant one these days, because we rarely see a tertiary syphilis people. And candidal infection, chronic hypoplastic candida patients, we are seeing it in our daily practice. It is considered as OPMD also, oral potential malignant disease also. And there are oncogenic viruses, that is EBV, HPV, resistance. Immunosuppression also causes loss of immunosurveillance and can lead to malignancies. Little bit of pathology. We know that in oral cavity we get a lot of structures, lot of tissues, nerve tissues, blood vessels, and out of them, the epithelial component give rise to oral squamous cell carcinoma, and 94% of the oral the malignancies are squamous cell carcinomas. When they are subjected to the insult of these etiological agents that I mentioned previously, this normal epithelium become dysplastic and ultimately gives rise to cancer. There are about 8 subtypes of squamous cell carcinomas. Out of them, this basaloid type is the most aggressive type, and the verrucous type, we know the verrucous carcinoma is not that much aggressive, it's a low grade variant. And post radiotherapy people, they will get spinning cell carcinoma mostly. In pathology report, we see a lot of things. The site is important, the site of the cancer. When you take the oral cavity, the floor of the mouth and the posterior 1/3 of the tongue are considered as graveyard areas. When you get a cancer in those areas, it is going to be prognostically very poor. Tumor thickness, if it is more than 9 mm of thickness, then the prognosis is going to be poor also. We have studied in our faculties about the invasive FUN. There are 4 variants. So the type 4, invasive FUN type 4 is where the single cells goes into invade the adjacent tissues are prognostically poor. And there are other important prognostic factors also which are in relevance to pathology. These patients may present to us with various symptoms. They may complain of a non-healing ulcer. Non-healing ulcer, we know that usually if the ulcer persists for more than 2 weeks, we have to be alert a little bit about it. But there are some major actus ulcers. They may not heal for about 4-5 weeks. So we have to be careful about the non-healing ulcers and persistent pain or discomfort. If you take this loose teeth for no reason, that is especially important in maxillary sinus series, because there are people, the patients who are presenting to us with good periodontal health, but they are having loose teeth, upper posterior teeth. We have to be very cautious when we are treating those people, because if we see no periodontal problem and these teeth are loose, we need to suspect about the maxillary sinus cancer. Lump in the neck without no reason, non-tender, a hard lump. That is, in other words, we call it cup syndrome, carcinoma of unknown tribe. It is mostly occurring after tonsillar area CS and piriform SSC. Year 8 will be there when there's mostly when there's a tongue malignancies, when it invades the lingual nerve. So there may be various presentations. The people will complain you the symptoms and when you look at, you may see various clinical pictures, growths or any white or red patches. And we need to know about these OPMDs, oral potential malignant disorders. Though they are not cancers, though they are not malignancies, they are likely to become malignancies. I have I listed them in the descending order of the potential for malignant transformation. When we take OPMDs, the proliferative varicose vein cavity, that is the most dangerous OPMD known. About more than 90% of the people who are getting this proliferative varicose varicose leukoplakia will transform into a malignancy. The least dangerous one is the lichen planus. When you get a red patch in a patient's mouth, we need not suspect OPMD or malignancy straight away. There are other conditions or the lesions that can make give rise to a white patch. Some of them are here. Mosaicism Baccarum is the linea alba. We get around occlusal pain. This is a picture encountered in when I was registered in Kalgoorlie Hospital, and this patient, I don't know whether sir can remember, Sunil sir can remember the patient. This is a old, middle-aged, this is an old lady, about 50 years old, and in about 3 months' time, this patient's lesion transformed into cancer. This is a picture of a chronic hypoplastic candidiasis patient. There are some differential diagnoses for a red patch. When we encounter a patient with a lesion, the cancerous lesion or OPMD, we need to find out some background information from the history, duration, how long it is there, and age. Age is very important because if young people get malignancy, the prognosis is going to be poor. The previous medical and surgical history. Smoking and alcohol, the habit history, that is also important. In Western people, they are not chewing beetles, so that they are mostly used to smoke and consume alcohol. They are usually getting tongue and floor of the mouth cancers. Beetle chewing, that is abundant in our part of the world. The people who are consuming those chewing beetle may get mostly buccal mucosa, gingival or retromolar cancers. Social history also important. When we are treating a patient, we need to know the background of a patient's family as well as the level of education, etc. And we need to assess the level of compliances also, because some people are very ignorant, so we need to address them accordingly. When you are examining the patient, we need to examine the lesion as well as the local regional spread. Local means the extent of the lesion. We may see the picture that is outside what we see in the mouth, but the cancer may be in the deeper structures. And the regional, that is the neck mets, the metastasis to the neck. And distant metastasis, though it is not that much frequently happening in oral cancers, there are cases that also do occur. And the medical status of the patient also very important, because if we are going to offer him whatever treatment, we need to know whether the patient is physically fit, medically fit for that to bear that treatment. When we arrive to the tentative diagnosis, that is the most likely diagnosis, we should not tell the patient that we may see a lesion that is that looks like a malignancy, but Without a biopsy report, never ever tell the patient that you are having such lesion. I will tell you why. If you look at this patient, this patient came to MLPT clinic about 2 weeks back, and when you look at this lesion, you can say, you will directly decide, you may be dead sure that this is a malignancy, but it is not so. It's a granular cell tumor. And this patient, even looking at this patient, you may decide that the patient is having cancer, but it is a parasitic infection, that is a leishmaniasis, spread by the sandflies, which is very much curable. So when we get a patient with either OPMD or a malignant type of lesion, we need to perform a biopsy, because this histopathological proof is mandated to go ahead with the treatment. And with the biopsy, we can decide the nature of the malignancy, and so we have the proof that we are treating a malignancy. And the second step is to find out the local extent of the tumor. We don't know how far it has spread, so we need to do X-rays, computer tomography, MRI, PET scan. Those are the modalities available for us to find out the extent of the tumor and the regional spread. For the neck nodes, we are usually doing ultrasound scan, and to find out what is in nodes, we can do FNACs also, X-ray, CT, MRI, PET again are useful in find out regional spread. Distant mets, we can go for these modalities. And not only that, we have to evaluate the patient's systemic health also. There's a American Anesthetist Society guidelines to evaluate the systemic health of a patient, that is called ASA status of a patient, and nutritional status also very much important. Biopsies could be of various types, you all know about it. Usually we are performing incisional biopsies in our clinics. This ultrasound, I told that to evaluate neck nodes, we are mostly going for ultrasound. The CT, we are using contrast enhanced CT. In case of trauma setup, we are not using contrast, but in case of evaluating a malignancy, we are going for contrast enhanced CT. MRI also, the CT is important in assessing hard tissue component mostly, but soft tissue is also visible. And magnetic resonance imaging, that is MRI, is importantly assessing soft tissue component. The PET scan or the positron emission tomography, we don't have that facility available in most of all around the country, but I think only one machine is available. And this positron emission tomography is very important in identifying cancer, malignant lesions all throughout the body. And I'll tell you how it works. Here we are injecting a radiopharmaceutical agent, that is a radiological isotope, into the patient's bloodstream, that is called fluorodeoxyglucose. And when it goes throughout the patient's bloodstream, it is taken up by the metabolically active tissues. After taking up these isotopes, they emit gamma rays. These gamma rays are detected by the gamma cameras, and so the lesions can be detected. This is especially important in identifying metastasis, distant metastasis. But this PET scan is not that much capable of demonstrating the anatomy. So it is always combined with either CT or MRI. So these two pictures are taken, the one with the PET and the one with the CT. So they are superimposed, CT or the MRI, they are superimposed, and you can see that CT scan report and the PET scan report. So when they are superimposed, we get a good picture where the lesion is. After these investigative modalities, we can reach a definitive diagnosis where we have the histological proof and local and regional extent as well as the distant metastasis, if any there, we can find out. The next step is to state the tumor. and we need to tell the patient. It depends on the consultant whether to tell the patient or the relatives or whatever. And we have to respect patient expectations also, because some patients are not willing to take treatment. We have to respect that also. After the information that is collected from this history examination, special investigations, we need to go for the multidisciplinary team. This is ideally composed of these following people. Dental surgeon also play a very important role there. In the multidisciplinary team, after discussing with the patient and the team members, we can devise a treatment plan, a particular treatment plan for that patient. It is not an easy thing for one person to decide upon a treatment plan, because there are a lot of factors that need to be considered. So you can see there are a lot of things that come into play in taking a treatment decision. After devising a treatment plan, we need to talk with the patient, because patient should agree to undergo the treatment. It should contain what are the treatment modes, order, duration, and ways of rehabilitation and follow-up also. There are 3 modes of treatment available for cancer, that is surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, or a combination of these. For small ones, that is stage 1 and 2 tumors, cancers, we go for a single model treatment usually. And for the stage 3 and 4, multimodal treatment is necessary, and in our setup, we are getting mostly the stage 3 and 4 cancer patients. But surgery is considered the mainstay of treatment. In a surgical patient, we need to assess his medical condition, whether the patient is fit to undergo anesthesia and undergo surgery. There's a grading that is called the ASA grading, as I mentioned previously, that is American Society of Anesthesiologists has devised this. We are usually carrying out surgical treatment for level 1, 2 and 3. 4 and 5 usually we are not going to treat, because the medical status of the patient may not fit for surgery. The surgery, that is composed of these 3 components, that is the resection of the primary lesion and the neck management if necessary, and as well as the reconstruction. Radiotherapy. Radiotherapy can be either a single modality treatment, or it could be as a part of multimodality treatment. It could be given before surgery, that is we call it neoadjuvant radiotherapy. If it is given post-surgically, then it is adjuvant radiotherapy. We can carry out radiotherapy with either curative or palliative intention. And you know that I think you know that this the power of radio waves. These waves are calculated by Grace, and usually for oral cancer it is 50 to 70 Grace. And if we once give radiotherapy on a particular site, it cannot be repeated to the same site again. This is how the radiotherapy works. It can directly damage the DNA, or it can make hydroxyl ions or the free radicals, and the free radicals can go and damage the DNA. And when these damaged DNA containing cells are going in the cell cycle, they will be directed to the apoptosis, apoptotic pathway. When giving radiotherapy, the oncologist, they construct a mask like this, that is to protect the surrounding areas, so that the radiotherapy beams can be given to the target area only. Chemotherapy could be given either orally or intravenously. It is also given neoadjuvant or as an induction therapy to shrink large tumors and make the surgery easier, and it can be also given post-surgically for microcystis or tumor spillage. And for the large tumors, we are giving palliative chemotherapy. This is a picture that shows how the sites where the chemotherapy agents acts. And there are no that much of chemotherapeutic agents for oral cancer like other cancers. Here is cisplatin, carboplatin, and 5-FQ, 5-fluorouracil. Cisplatin is the most commonly used term. With chemotherapy and radiotherapy, there are a lot of complications. Mucositis that comes with chemotherapy and radiotherapy both. The fungal infections can be induced. Viral infections, osteoradionecrosis comes with radiotherapy. Xerostomia because of the damage to the salivary glands, dysplasia, the loss of taste, and myelosuppression comes with chemotherapy. There's acute neutropenia. So the patients, when they immediately after they start chemotherapy, they get this neutropenia. They are much liable to get infections. Anemia and bleeding also due to this myelosuppressive activity. When it comes to dental management, as a dental surgeon, what we can do? Patient education. We need to educate the patient. Both oral and written instructions should be given about the oral and dental complications that comes with this treatment modalities. And they should be educated about the need for compliance. Usually these people who are ignorant, they do not comply. So we need to stress on that, and we need to educate them how to prevent these complications also. There's an effect on salivary glands. This mostly we can see in radiotherapy, xerostomia. So to prevent xerostomia, we can increase the hydration. We can ask the patient to drink a lot of water and other things. Salivary substitutes can be given, which are containing calcium and phosphate to facilitate the remineralization, and alcohol-free mouthwashes because alcohol can dry out the mucosa. Salivary stimulation can be attained with this gustatory stimulation, that is xylitol containing chewing gums and lozenges, and cholinergic agents like pilocarpine, saline, and soy. We need to prevent caries occurring. So dietary counseling to consume sugar-free foods, and high-potency topical fluoride also can be provided, that is in forms of sodium chloride gel, custom-made paste for the patient, and sodium chloride containing toothpaste, chloride varnish that can be applied 3 times per year, artificial saliva, and this should be continued during and after radiotherapy and for the rest of the life. There are a lot of measures that we can take to make the patient's mouth aseptic. We can't make the patient's mouth sterile because microorganisms they are in our oral cavity. So we have to make sure with these measures that the microorganisms within the patient's mouth does not go into the bone, does not enter the bone. If it goes into the bone, it can give rise to osteomyelitis, which is a dead complication, and osteoradionecrosis. If you are going to perform extraction, that is or deep scaling, I have mentioned that deep scaling pockets that are less than 6 millimeters, and the extraction, they should be done about 2 weeks before. We need to allow time for healing. And if the radiotherapy is the radiotherapy incorporates the lateral pterygoids, then the trismus is most likely to occur. So we need to give them exercise. We need to teach them exercises. When to extract teeth? These are some guidelines. It is based on dental and cancer therapy conditions, both, not only the dental conditions. The dental risk factors, the primary and secondary teeth caries, if they are there, better to go for extractions. Root caries, if they are involving more than half of the root circumference, better take that tooth out. And root resorption, pulpal diseases, probably if it is more than 6 millimeters, better take that tooth out also. Percussion involvement, mobility if it is more than 2 millimeters, residual teeth, roots should be taken. Partially infected teeth and fully infected with pericorneal pathology, and people who are having poor oral hygiene and low dental hygiene, it is better to take them out before radiotherapy. The malignancy related risk factors are, if the radiation dose is more than 55 grays, then they are likely to get osteoarthritis necrosis if there's an infective focus. So better to make them edentulous. Molars, if the molars is radiation free, and teeth near the tumor also should be extracted. These are mucosal guards. When the radiotherapy is given, the radiation backscatter can happen. That radiation beams can hit the metal stuff and can backscatter. That means it can turn its way and harm the mucosa. So to protect the mucosa, these mucosal guards can be made. After we offer surgery, then we have to reconstruct. When we resect, we have to reconstruct to restore the form and the function as much as possible. So, not only reconstruction, after reconstructing what we have taken off, we have to rehabilitate to bring the patient back to the normal form. We need to make him function as into the pre-disease status. This is a reconstruction ladder. We need to go from the simple things to the complex things. Prosthesis also come within this reconstruction ladder. If there are maxillary defects, how to reconstruct? We are usually going for prosthesis. The maxillary defect can be classified as partial or total maxillectomy. For a in detail classification, we have the Brown's classification. There are a lot of disabilities associated with these maxillary defects. So we can give them a prosthesis, that is surgical obturator during just after the time of the surgery. So it will prevent wound contamination and it will help the patient to speak and swallow. And it should be decided by the surgeon and the prosthodontist together, because surgeon has to say the resecting margins and the prosthodontist is the person who is constructing it. That is the immediate surgical obturator. Then there's one called intermediate surgical obturator. All these are for the maxillary defects. And for that intermediate one, we know that the wound shrinks. So we can realign the immediate surgical obturator to adjust to so that it goes and fit into that healing wound. Or can construct new one also. After 3 to 4 months time, where the wound heals well, we can go for definitive or permanent surgical obturator, where the patient can keep it for lifetime. And we can use implants. Though it is not that much practiced here, we can use implants to facilitate the retention. For the tongue and the mandibular defects, it is very complex, difficult, not as maxillary defects. We can see the problems that are associated with these defects when we resected those parts out. With the treatment, with or without after reconstruction, 3 to 4 weeks later we can use this mandibular guidance therapy. That is an exercise to prevent scar contraction and the trismus that is associated with the surgery. So we can ask the patient to displace the mandible to the non-surgical side, because we know that when there is a wound, it contracts. So it drags the rest of the remaining part towards it. So we need to pull it towards the other side, to the non-surgical side. So it will stretch the healing tissues and lessen the trismus and the scar contraction. Mandibular resection prosthesis. This is a prosthesis which resembles the partial dentures. So it engages the others, the non-resected side of the mandible. And when we place it, it will guide the occlusion. It will, we know when the part of the mandible is missing, the occlusion is not going to get into the proper place. So this will help to guide the occlusion, the mouth closure and opening both. And the maxillary guidance ramps, that is also can be used to guide the occlusion. When the patient closes mouth, this guidance will bring the the mandible to the correct occlusion. And palatal speech and swallowing aids, when the tissues are missing in the lower part, the lower jaw, the tongue space is reduced, and this palatal speech and swallowing nodes can be constructed to compensate for that. It will help the patient to speak and swallow in a much easier way. After treating the patient, basically after surgery, we need to follow up. It is based on this risk of relapse and second primary treatments equal and toxicities mostly associated with the chemotherapy. There we need to, in the clinical visits, we can do it in the clinical visits. We need to do a complete head and neck examination. If suspicion arises, we can perform this fiber optic examination also. The time duration for the year one, it is usually 1 to 3 months. And for more aggressive ones, say for example anaplastic malignancies, or the patient is not that much educated, not come with a poor compliance, the time duration should be shorter. We can ask the patient to come every 1 month. For the second year, it is usually 2 to 6 months intervals. For the third to fifth year, we call the patient in 4 to 8 month interval, and more than 5 years, it is yearly clinical visits. Apart from the clinical examination, we can go for imaging. And it is not only the lesion that we need to consider in the follow-up visits. We have to pay our attention to speech, swallowing and mastication of the patient. And we need to take chest X-rays if they are not willing to stop smoking. Mouth opening, state of prosthesis, we need to consider. Dental evaluation should be continued, and the level of nutrition. Surveillance, the psychological status of the patient also should be attended. So these patients, they undergo depression because they are living with uncertainty. They don't know when the cancer comes and kills them. So they may undergo depression, and we need to keep an eye on that also. For the patients that we can't offer a cure, there's a palliative care. According to WHO definition, it is to improve the quality of life of a patient and the family with teamwork. And most important factor here is we need to keep the patients pain free, because this patient is going to die. So the patient should not suffer with pain. So making the patient pain free is a must. The basics of this palliative care are provide relief from pain. That is the mainstay of palliative care. And it regards dying as a normal process. We need to make the patient understand dying is a normal thing. And we are not trying to hasten or postpone the day. It should occur in a natural way. And the psychological and spiritual aspects also of the patients also should be considered. Religious things are very important. This is a WHO pain ladder where we have the painkillers that we are giving for different types of pain. For the cancer pain that is considered severe pain, we are usually going for morphine. If not enough, fentanyl also will be given. As healthcare professionals, we need to consider these aspects also, because we are bound to the society. We have a responsibility to prevent cancers from occurring. And thank you.